Hey, I'm Daniel Berger, and this is Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. Welcome to the podcast where Metro New York real estate meets great stories and a douse of humor. Forget the dry sales talk. Here we dive into the fun and unexpected moments of real estate. Join me each week as we explore Westchester, Long Island, the Bronx, and more. You'll hear about the people, the places, and the crazy situations that make this industry so interesting. Thanks to our sponsor, Remax Prestige Properties, we're ready to share the lighter side of real estate. Whether you're a pro, a buyer, or just curious, we've got something for everyone. Ready for today's adventure? Let's get into it. Well, everyone, welcome to another episode of Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. I'm Daniel Berger, your host, trying to bring people from all around the world or all around the U.S. to just get in and chat real estate and chat other things. And this week, I have the honor to bring on Joseph Silzell. I want to call him Sizzle, though, because, he's killing it in the real estate world, killing it in a lot of things. And we're happy to have him all the way from Grand Junction, Colorado. Hey, Joseph, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So, yeah, again, thank you for your service. Our country's free for people that volunteer basically to go protect us and defend our freedoms from all over the world. And so we should never, you don't need to have a Veterans Day or whatever to thank people. So I do want to thank you for investing your time and energy in protecting our freedom. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So real estate must be so easy after being a United States Marine Corps veteran.
People always ask me if it's easy or ask me if that was super hard. And I'll tell them what I tell everybody is some days it is and some days it's not, right? The best job I've ever had, some of the best people I ever knew, and some of the worst people. And guess what? Real estate's the exact same. Some days you have great days, some days you have great clients. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
It seems like some of the things that you do, like even some of your hobbies, which we'll get into, kind of a lot of them have the same thought process, right? Like in the military, you might have a plan on what you need to do, whether it's defend something or attack something or save whatever your mission is. And in real estate, your mission is basically, when you're a listing agent, is to properly list a house and bring in people that are interested and then get to the finish line on the closing table. And if you represent buyers, it's finding the right house, doing all the necessarily pre-work, and then trying to get to the closing table. And sometimes things don't always happen to plan.
Oh yeah, like in the Marine Corps, we call it semper gumby, always flexible, and that's where I think is something you always have to take, especially as a real estate agent. Is there's Plan A, and as we all know, Plan A does not work out very often. So you got to have Plan B, C, and guess what? Usually you end up in F or G is where you actually end up being at. So I think one of the best things I've learned though is there's always going to be points of friction, and the more you can get comfortable and the more you can look forward in time and see those points of friction, the easier you make not only your job, but then the life of your clients. I talk about expectations a lot with my clients because I think if you set them the proper expectations, it makes your life a whole lot easier.
A lot of times people ask me, like, what could go wrong? Well, there's so many things that could go wrong. Do you, so you were talking about setting expectations. Do you set the expectation or to get specific, or do you kind of wait for things to develop and then come up with solutions basically to help get through certain issues? Because so many things can happen. How do you work on that?
So we'll talk about buyers and then sellers a little bit, but buyers, I always sit them down for a buyer's consultation once they got pre-approved and say, hey, especially if it's their first time buying, hey, these are all the steps to buy, right? And I kind of give caveats in there. We're going to get you pre-approved, then we got to find the house, then we got to put offers in, get them accepted. And then once the offers are accepted, then we have a whole nother checklist, right? We've got title work, we've got insurance, we've got your inspection, we've got appraisal, we've got loan. If you're selling a house, you have more things added to that checklist. And then I walk them through like, hey, best and worst case scenarios for a lot of these things. And it just gives them a good, like, I always call the warm and fuzzy. But if you give them just enough so they understand it, and then they come to you for the specifics. And then when you're like showing houses, you're putting in an offer, you're under contract, you can kind of go back to those things. Remember how a few of these things could or may not show up. All right, these ones have and these ones haven't. So I don't think it's about explaining every possible scenario because I'm finding out new stuff all the time, right? But it's getting them ready to know that it's not going to be a smooth, it might not be the smoothest flight they've ever been on, right? When the captain, the pilot comes on and goes, "Hey, we're going to have a little turbulence today." Everybody goes, "Okay," and then they're okay with a little turbulence. What I think a lot of people don't do is say there's going to be some turbulence. So then when the lenders reached out 19 times for paperwork, or you have something bad come on the inspection, or you have something crazy like the buyer gets out of the rental or cancel the rental property before you're even clear to close, like you just got to try to set up the best expectations that you can.
What's interesting is it seems like in the military a lot you have like your SOP, standard operating procedures. Do you have something like that in real estate, or is it really just something that's tucked away in your head and that you try to explain it to clients as case by case?
So no, I have checklists and I also have packets for all these things. Whether I'm meeting with a buyer first time or not, whether I'm meeting with a seller first time or not, I've got different packets where I actually have checklists that I've made myself that we go through. So like when I sit down with my buyer, I have 21 questions that I ask them before we go look at a house, right? And then I've got some follow-on homework that they have to do. If once we're under contract, I give them another checklist of, hey, these are the things that are going to be going on, during the process. Same thing for a seller. Hey, I just do it reverse for the seller. Hey, these are the things the buyer's going to have to go through. These are the things you're going to have to worry about as a seller. And this is kind of how the process is going. So I also think the nice thing about the military is they always say you have to start from the endpoint and work backwards. It's called a reverse timeline. And we do that on a lot of things. When you think about a seller, the biggest thing for a seller is not selling the house. It's where you're going to go once you get it sold. So you have to figure out where they're going to go, and then you work backwards from that.
I think first off, I'm glad we're in different markets because I would never be able to compete with someone as organized and detailed as you are. I think that's great. What I also love about real estate, though, is that it seems like from your military background, the regimen of having lists and going through them makes you probably feel comfortable, and then probably makes your clients feel comfortable because you're in like your wheelhouse in essence. And so I think you describing that to me sounds like an amazing experience, like something that I would want to do. I'm like totally different. I have no lists. They're all in my head, but so I
So
do
I
it.
did that. So I'll tell you this. Thank you for saying I'm organized. I never feel like it. But when I started, that's how I was. I just kind of knew the process and I figured it out. And when things came up, they came up. And what I found out more and more, just like in the military, is if you don't have a set standard, you fall to your highest level of preparation, right? So what I was seeing was the same problems were happening. People were asking me the same questions over and over, and I was having some of the same issues because I didn't have that structure. And then what I found out is in the military, they call it a subject matter expert. So if I'm going to go teach you something, I have to be a subject, and that subject, I have to be the master of it, right? So when people come to me and I want to be a professional, I want them to walk away thinking I know way more than they know about the subject, right? But I also want to teach them something about it. So I think that's where you can align yourself as the professional. Not saying anybody else's business way isn't done. Obviously, you've done a great job, and you are who you are, and it works for you their way. But for me to feel like I was that subject matter expert, I needed more of a roadmap, and obviously my clients kind of like it too.
Ultimately, that's the beauty is that everyone's different, right? And so you have to adapt to who the clients are. So I will say that I do have some clients that are more regimented where they kind of want me to lay things out. I think something that we do differently would be that you're more of like I'm going through the 21 questions and asking them and getting answers and doing. I'm probably more of a storyteller. So I'm more talking with my hands and things like that. But like huge texting, a lot of phone calls where I'm explaining what's going on. So I do think that the information gets there, and I just want to do it that way. It's also different though. You've done like we both do about 45 to 50 sales a year. That's is that right? That's what you do. I just happen to be lucky that I'm in a market where the prices are double, triple, and more than what you're doing because it's the same amount of work. You're doing a transaction's a transaction. And 100%. So I'm just like, oh my God, you've had to, in order to, I see that we're both Remax, right? You're
Mhm.
on Remax 4000, and I saw that you're Hall of Fame. I'm Hall of Fame. So, but that's based off of commissions. And so for you to get there, it's probably twice as hard. I do apartments. I mean, my lowest one was probably like a $41,000 cooperative, but I've also done a $4 million house. So, you don't really have that in your market. So you're really grinding and working. And, you're doing your list of 21. I guess we're both about the same amount, but you're doing your list with 21 people 40 to 50 times a year. So it's so much work. And so it's interesting when people are like, oh, it's a real estate agent, you're overpaid or whatever. We're like, no, Joseph has this list of 21 things, and every day the phone's going to ring, and and there are issues that come up, and both of us have to be solutions based and try to be positive and try, right? So it's our job as realtors is to take the problem and then like turn lemons into lemonade. How do we still get to the closing table in a way that our clients aren't going to be like so annoyed that like I can't believe you just helped me buy this lemon, right? So
Mhm.
that's part of what we're doing as well, right?
Oh yeah, and it like you said, there's so many different aspects to this business. I love it when people are like, well, they get overpaid, and it's like, well, if you went to get any other professional that was dealing with any kind, like any of the slight amount of money that we end up dealing with, you would want somebody that has all their ducks in a row and has experience and treats this as a business. Like when I set meetings and stuff, it's not like people think a real estate agent. I get my friends, and I'm sure your friends say this all the time. Well, I wish I worked for myself. I wish I didn't have a set schedule. It's like, yeah, I don't have a set schedule. My schedule is set by all the people that I'm responsible for. And whether that's my wife, whether that's my family, or whether that's my clients, that's who I'm responsible for. So, showing up at 6 o'clock on a Saturday in the morning, and then I'm working till 6 or 7 o'clock on Saturday evening, and I'm holding two open houses a weekend, and or any of these things where everybody else is, well, I get my nights and weekends off, or I get my holidays off. We don't usually have that luxury. Some people do, and some people run their business that way. But for most of us, we're a little bit at the whims of our clients. So you want somebody that's professional but flexible, somebody that treats this like a business, not like a hobby. But you also want somebody that will be real with you. So when you have to add all those things in, and again, we're paid on our productivity, we're not paid on showing up. So when you add all that stuff in, there it really does take a few special people to do what we do.
I feel that you're saying the exact same words that would be coming out of my mouth, except for that you're many years younger and you're much more handsome.
Well,
So,
thank you. I
uh,
appreciate that.
um,
I can't grow a beard though, so you got me. You got me there.
it's COVID. COVID, my son's like, he has one now too. My son's 21 and he's like, Dad, I had it before you. I go, wait, let's go back to the pictures. And so we did prove that, it's more like I don't feel like shaving every day type of thing. But I mean, you're hitting it spot on. And maybe, and that's why I also see the same thing in me that I see in you of you seem happy in what you're doing and excited, right? Because we get to deal with all different types of people. And you know what? Some people are awesome and we love, and some people we don't love as much. But still, our job is to get to the finish line and make it as pleasant as possible. And I had an example of somebody, one of my investors got in over his head, wasn't really doing a good job with the flip, overspent, and he never tested a septic tank and a buried oil tank. And I implored him to test those things before, so much so that the lawyer that he used also got on record saying, we're just confirming that your realtor asked you to do these things. He's like, yeah. So of course, septic failed, the oil tank test failed, and he had no funds for it. I lent him like $10,000 to with no fee, right? More of like just a concierge program because and I lent him the money. I paid for the removal of the tank, putting it in the basement, and he just wasn't happy. It was just like he didn't even he barely even said thank you. I don't think he even said thank you for the $10,000. And it's like, you know what? I'm not going to let that ruin my day. I did it because I did it because I wanted to also get to the closing table, and I couldn't get any buyers willing to take the house with the buried oil tank. So that's why we proactively had to do that. But sometimes people are going to like what you do, sometimes they're not. You just have to be like true to yourself and know that you're doing the right thing. So even though he
100%.
may not appreciate it, other people that were involved in the transaction, the buyer knew it, the lawyers knew it, the title person. So they're all like, "Oh, look what this guy Danny does." So you get some legs out of it, but you can't put. You just got to be true to yourself.
Well, my managing broker, who has been a great mentor to me, Joe Tripoli, he won Broker of the Year in 2020, and just for Remax, and is amazing, amazing man. He taught me one of the best lessons I've learned in real estate, and this is going out to real estate agents, so this is a great thing to listen to. Is sometimes you have to make business decisions, and sometimes those business decisions are you're not making as much money, you're not making any money, or you're just coming out of pocket to help somebody out. And he goes, a lot of those people will never be the people to thank you, but some of them will, and those are the ones you actually care about. And he goes, not saying like you have a perfect example of somebody that literally they were in a bad spot, you helped them out, and they weren't even grateful. I have a client that I helped a couple of years ago. They put the roof on themselves, didn't pull a permit, all the bad things. They used some shingles that I think they found outside of Home Depot because they were only
They
rated for
were
10
returned,
years.
right?
It was like every bad thing you could ever imagine. And these people had done a lot of work to the house themselves, not good work, not up to standards of anybody, but they believed it was valuable. And we got it under contract. I think it was like 2 extensions to keep this deal alive. And it came down to they needed to replace the roof. And at the end of the day, it was about $8,000 because the other side was actually helping pay for some of the roof if we would come up with $8,000. And I took all of that out of my commission. I think I made like a couple grand off of it or whatever at the end. And the tile company asked me that. They're like, hey, we don't usually see people take this little of a fee or like literally give all their commission back to this. And they said, why did you do that? And I said, pretty much what you said. I don't think we're going to get a buyer to buy this without doing it. Unfortunately, I'm tired of having these clients and I need to have time to go help other clients. So instead of killing this deal and doing this all over again and hoping it sells, hoping to get something back for my time later on, I'm just going to have it close. I'm going to take the business decision to be able to go help more people. And guess what? Those people, they weren't super happy. Guess what? Why? Because you can't please everybody. And some people you can never, no matter what you do, they won't be happy. But we got it closed. They ended up referring me somebody else later on, which was awesome, which is a great thing. But the best part of it was I got my time back. And there's so many times in this business because our time is so valuable. It's our money. It's how we do everything else. Is if somebody doesn't want to work with me, great. I'm going to get rid of that client. I'm going to go find 3 more that want to work with me. And guess what? If there is a client that I can help, even if it's not really going to help me, let's get to the closing table. Let's get this moved on. And then I can go help more people. And it's so amazing to me that it comes back to me time and time again. When you do the right thing, even if you're not appreciated, it'll come back in droves.
I agree 100%. I have another example of that where I put in an offer for a client. They lowballed the offer and it really pissed off the listing. It pissed off the seller probably more than anything. But
Yeah.
and I certainly told my client, the buyer, what price we should come in. But I work for them. We work for our clients. And if
Yeah.
that's what they direct me to do, it's my job to do it, even though it probably made me look I don't even want to say it made me look bad because it's ultimately I have to work for them. So I
Yeah.
think it made me look good because I'm not coming in and they kept saying, "Oh my God, but this market, how can you do that?" And I'm like, because your house has been on the market for like 90 days and you keep having a problem with whomever you're picking, and this is what they want. And then there was like this weekend thing of back and forth of raising the price slowly, whatever. And then they just shut it down and they were like ignoring us. So my client felt that we were in a place where nothing was happening, and they ended up putting their offer in with another client, another agent, an agent who did not even ever show them the house, but put it in. So it turns out they eventually told me that they bought the house, the one that we were talking about. In a better way, they probably could have told me I could have brought in another person who's not in my company. We could have split, whatever. So they bought the house, they told me, and like I was like annoyed a little bit. Like ultimately, I was like, I'm gonna be bigger, I'm gonna be a bigger person. And I congratulated them for buying the house. Ultimately, that's what I wanted to do. So actually, I think I found out about it when they were in contract. And I actually went. I actually spoke to the buyer's agent, to their broker, and I was trying to work a deal out for maybe like a referral fee. They wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Um, it turns out that the person that was the most at blame was the listing agent, because the listing agent knew that it was the same offer from another
Yeah.
client, and that was really more of the issue. Not the buyer agent didn't really know that happened.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to real estate court, and there was a hearing and whatever, and I ended up winning, right?
Mhm.
So but winning just meant that listing agent basically had a penalty and had to take extra classes and maybe pay a fine or whatever. But it but and it was interesting because during the trial I had a bunch of agents, and I even had the buyer testified on my behalf. They testified of what happened. And so that did make me feel better, though. I will say that.
Yeah.
So I didn't get any money from the sale. They've referred three people to me, and they've referred people to me like 800,000, 900, and it was a stressful situation. They were uncomfortable because they just wanted the house, and I just wanted them to have the house. If they would have come to me again, I could have done another local broker. We would have, whatever. But in the end of the day, I just being a professional, right? That has gotten me referrals, and like my social media a lot. And so I'm glad, and everything teaches you in life. So maybe that was the way that I became the better agent, to have that happen to me. So that's kind of why, like when I say the adventures of a real estate broker, I started doing this podcast, and I'm actually writing a book because there's zany things like that have come out. So I guess that's a question. Your roof one, I think, was a fantastic example, but give me like a wacky thing that has happened to you that is like when you tell your friends they're just dying, that I can't believe that happened.
Oh, let me think for a second. I've got a whole bunch of good stories. I'm trying to think of a wacky one. Oh, okay. Here's this one made a little bit of national news, so it was kind of interesting. It was in,
Right
so
then.
I'm from Grand Junction. We've had like three news stories since I've lived here that have gone national. This one was a little while ago. So me and a business partner, we buy and flip houses. And we know a lot of people that do it. There's only about 100,000 people here. There's about 1,000 agents. There's probably only like 10 or 15 people that actually flip houses where I'm at. Well, like, one of the people that buys them and then usually resells them to a flipper or does something else, and we're pretty good friends. We've done a lot of deals together. She was trying to buy this house from this very odd situation. Anyway, she got it for a really, really good price. It was a horror house. It was everything bad you've ever seen on any show, right? Anyway, so she's having this house is full of trash and junk and random stuff. And she bought it. She got the people out of them that day, and then she was reselling it to a flipper the next day, just getting her margins and walking away. Well, the flipper's out there with her. They're walking through the stuff. This lady puts an ad on Craigslist and Facebook. Hey, it's an open house. You can come take whatever you want. The refrigerator, the boxes, anything in the house. They just wanted all the junk out of it, right? So people are randomly showing up and taking stuff out of the house and doing whatever. And she's closing on this house to resell it to the flipper at 3 p.m. that day, right? So at 2:30, she's about to get up. The flipper's there. This lady comes in and goes, "Hey, can I have the freezer in the garage?" And she's like, "Yeah, sure. But you have to take all the meat and stuff that's in it." And the lady's like, "Can I just dump it out?" She's like, "No, I'd rather you not, because it's going to stink if you just dump it on the side of the whatever." So anyway, so she's not in the garage. The lady, all of a sudden she hears a scream and runs into the garage. Her and the flipper run into the garage, and this lady's holding a human head that was in the freezer. So long story short, that flipper got freaked out and did not buy the property. So they turned around and called me. Now I was a sheriff's deputy. I know a lot of different people in the community. She called me and said, "Oh my gosh, I've got to get this thing sold. Do you want to buy it for what they're buying it for?" And I'm like, "Hey, this is a pretty good deal." So I was like, "I'm sure we will. I'll call my buddy on the police force." Called him. They were already over there doing all this stuff with the house. Obviously, a very big stigma against the house. But I ended up buying what they initially called the house head, and it was in the news and everything else. So I literally, when people are like, "Well, you got to check the fridge and freezer, make sure there's not, a body in the closet," there literally was a head in the freezer. So that's one of my more crazy stories.
That's a great story. So I have one that's and again, it's in my book that we're like 9 chapters into the book right now. But I had one where it was a postal worker. He died, and it was the next of kin was like a nephew or a step nephew. The step nephew never knew he had the uncle. It's when the county contacted him. So he and I go in the house together the first time. There's like dead animals. There's like a hole in the ceiling. There's like pornography. The place is a mess. There was 12 shotguns and two skulls. There was also a Charger and a Mercury. There were two cars in front that we had to take care of as well. but we called the police. The local police came. They took the heads, the skulls, and they said, you can't come back in the house. We have to identify what they are. And I have like pictures of I have the pictures of the detective or whatever. And a couple days go by, they're like, okay, they are human. Well, one of them might have been like a science project because there were some hooks on the skull. So they weren't worried about that one. The other one, like, it is a human head. You have to wait a little bit more because it could be a crime scene. We don't know what it is.
Mhm.
Then like a day or so later, they come back and they said, okay, the head's been severed from the body for over 100 years. So it's your guy didn't do it. You're safe to go. We're keeping the heads, but we're safe to go back. So that's one of the crazy stories that I have. But yours definitely takes it. So it was like it was a head. It wasn't a skull. It was really a head.
No, so it was very, very sad story. I won't get into it because it's still
Right.
technically an ongoing investigation, but it was a very sad story, and it had been from a relative of the people that sold the house originally.
Yeah. So you, that's that. I'm glad I asked the question. That's kind of what, is things like that. You're just like, I cannot believe that
Oh
happened. And then
yeah, I mean, I've seen stuff from hoarders. I've seen stuff from people. One of the best stories, and this is one of the heartstring stories I always talk about, is I had a 19-year-old that reached out to me on social media when I was a brand new agent. I was probably maybe a year and a half in, and she reached out to me and she was very, very upset. She was pregnant. She was 19 years old and she had a German Shepherd and she couldn't find a place to rent. And I wasn't doing anything with rentals, but she was asking me about this stuff. And I was like, well, we have these like down payment assistance programs. Have you ever thought about buying a house? She's like, it's going to cost me thousands of dollars. And I got her with a lender that could do, we have $1,000 down program here, which the grant helps you with the other part of the down payment. So we got the seller to pay some concessions for her closing costs, and we actually were able to get her a house. So the best part of the story is she had her baby 2 days before we closed. Her father was very abusive, so we got her out of that relationship. So we had friends, and I facilitated that went over to her house, removed all of her stuff while the dad was at work. She got out of the hospital, came straight to the closing, signed the papers, and we moved her into her house. And literally it was the other side of town. Her dad didn't know where she went, and it literally just moved her out of it. So there's so many great stories. Like the wacky ones and crazy ones are always good to talk to, but sometimes it's just going back to like the really ones that like I know that changed that girl's life, and I'm still talking to her today. Like I know that there's some people out there that we genuinely helped because this girl could not find a place to go.
that happens all the time. An example that was a little similar was someone that needed to sell the house. They grew up in the house. I think she lived there for 60 years. She was on like oxygen tank. So it was really, she had some medical problems and she needed a place. It was too much house. They needed an apartment. I ended up finding them a rental, a full house rental, but they didn't have all of their money was tied up in the house. So I ended up having to front their first month. Actually, I paid their first month, their security, and also the commission, right? Like I
Mm.
fronted it while we were still in contract. Well, they also needed some work done of painting and deck work. So I actually prepaid that for them. So we figure everything's a go. And then we go, oh, then we find out towards the end, after all that money was out there, and I didn't charge them for any of the money and it was like $26,000 of lending, actually.
Mm.
I only made $16,000 of commission on the sale. So at the closing, I get a $26,000 reimbursement check and then $16,000. But it turns out that there was a problem with title, that she thought her father gave her the house, but there was two siblings that were still, she only owned a third of the house, which is a little bit of a problem when you don't own 100% or at least a majority of the house. But so then our lawyer got quick into action. Luckily, there are lawyers that we use in New York. So I can be a real estate broker as opposed to being a lawyer. But we were able to, at the last minute, get like affidavits signed by the two sisters that basically said that they relinquished their stake in the house. So we were able to close the closing table. I mean, she basically was crying and saying, I couldn't have done any of this without you. And that's why we do it, right? That meant more to me than really anything, that I'm able to help her. And she's told the stories. It's actually, she was a referral from one of my clients who was like, couldn't believe the story. And now he tells that story and he's given me multiple business himself. He's referred other people. So it's really, like the legs of our stories is so deep. So whether we're good or bad, if we're bad, the legs are there too. So
Oh yeah.
that's why it's our job that's why it's really a 24/7 job, because you have to, it could be Saturday night. And if someone's calling you, you should pick it up. I
Well,
pick up my phone.
yeah, you never know what's going to happen. A great example of that I have is going back to your Saturday night, right? So this was 2019. Sitting on my couch, I've been posting stuff to social media, trying to get business, doing my own thing. And at 6:30 on a Saturday night, I get a message from a guy, and it was something about, hey, if your rent's above this, you might be able to buy a house or something, right? And he shot me a sarcastic remark saying like, I only pay $400 in a month in rent. What can that buy me, right? And I was like, oh, unfortunately, you can't. You'd have to be much higher than that, and this whole thing. But he was literally just a sarcastic remark. Well, anyway, 2 days later, he messaged me back and he's like, hey, I actually had a question about buying. And I was like, great. And I talked to him, right? So that conversation at 6:30, whatever night, that guy ended up being an Army vet. I ended up helping him buy a house. His brother was a Marine. I helped him buy a house. His brother's wife's parents moved here from North Carolina. I helped them buy a house. His brother ended up selling his house and buying another house. Their cousin bought a house with me. The original brother's wife's parents bought and sold a house with me. And then now they're selling their house with me to buy another house. And another cousin bought the house. So that one conversation in 2019 at 6:30 at night, because I just replied professionally to a sarcastic comment on social media, ended up making me quite a bit of money and helping this family, which now two of them are my best friends. Like we still do stuff. I go to birthdays. We go to, he's having a little boy now. We went and did the baby shower together. Like that's the thing about this stuff. You never know who you're going to talk to and who you're going to touch by talking.
There certainly, work-life balance. It seems that ours is more work, but very similar to me. Again, we're very similar, where your work has turned into your life because you're friends with people that you work with. So why wouldn't you want to pick up the phone? And there are people that say, no, I put my phone down at 5 o'clock at night and that's it. And I understand why somebody would want to do that, right? It's your life, and if that's what you want to do, that's fine.
That's a
I
business
don't.
decision.
Correct. I don't think that in a real estate world, I think you limit yourself in what you can do in real estate when you do that, because clearly people have it on their voicemail. Then their clients know, oh, I can't talk to you now. As opposed to, if you text me, I tell people you can text me 24/7. I'm probably going to answer 18/7. This past year, I was on a safari in Africa. I'm answering the phone because I'm in the lodge or I'm on the truck,
Yeah.
whatever. It's like, because you're replying to people. So what people write about me in their Zillow review is that I'm always available. But that's my goal. I want to be, mostly available. Obviously, during this Zoom, I'm not available. So sometimes if I go out, incognito for a little bit, people are like, what happened? And I'm like, because, there are other things you need to do. But,
But see, I tell people, I was like, if you don't get a hold of me, one, I'm gonna call you back the same day unless it's like super late, and then I'll call you back tomorrow. But I said, if you don't get a hold of me, it's because I'm with other clients. And just like I don't answer my phone in front of you, I don't answer my phone in front of other clients. And
right.
so when I don't answer the phone, I'm gonna get back to you. And I always do that. I like your 18/7 thing. That's really good. What I tell people is, hey, unless we're putting in an offer, if you call me after 6 o'clock, I may not answer. Go ahead and text me and email me. I said, if you do call me after 6 o'clock, the only thing, the only reason to be if the house is burning down, the only thing I can do is call 911. So you might want to just call them first.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about it is again, you want to be reachable, you want to be attainable. We're going through some of the biggest stress of people's lives, buying and selling, moving, and usually it's not just that one thing. It's not usually I'm moving because I can move. It's usually somebody died, somebody's getting divorced. There's so many other things that are happening. We're about to have a baby, somebody's pregnant. Like there's so many things that are happening in their life. So you want to be, like I always say, I'm responsible for them because they've put a lot of responsibility on me. But at the same time, yeah, take time for your family. Do what's right for you. Enjoy your time with family. Don't make your family feel second nature.
I'm a little being older. I guess the advantage of being older is I'm an empty nester now. So, with a 25-year-old and a 21-year-old, I had probably a little easier to answer the phone late, but I will say that me answering the phone at 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, even on Saturdays, has turned into things. Oh, and I need to list a house. My sister and I have to sell a parent house. Can you get here tomorrow? And those things do happen. So it's interesting. We all, and listen, part of my podcast is also clearly for a social media presence, right? I want when people are going to go to YouTube or Spotify or whatever, and then they're going to connect with you. And you know what? You might have something that you now need in New York or Connecticut, and you're going to talk to me. If I need something, I'm going to. So it's networking, it's meeting people, it's conversation. So you do all you can so that people can know who you are. And then you're not going to pick up the phone when they actually need you and call you. So it's
Yeah. Somebody calling me is the best thing. It's the best gift you could give me, right? It's somebody I'm not having to reach out to, they're reaching out to me. I'll give you two quick stories that have happened the last like 60 days or maybe 90 days. So it was probably the first week in July. I got a phone call at, I don't know what time of day it was on a Sunday. I think I was in church actually. And sent straight to voicemail, but it's texted, hey, I'm sorry, I'm in church. I'll give you a call when I'm done or whatever, and then call that number right when I got done. Oh no, that was the second time. So the first time I was at the church, we had the Bible class for the kids, and I'm there, and I get a phone call, and I'm like, hey, excuse me, I gotta step out and take this. So I take a phone call, random phone call. They called my office, and there was somebody supposed to be at my office to answer the floor calls, right? You probably have this too. And that person did not show up for their phone call. They did not answer their phone when the office like sent the number to them. So they sent it to me or a few other people as a second person because we typically answer our phones. So I talked to this person and they're $1 million buyer and wanted to look at one house in 2 weeks when they fly out. Now in my market, $1 million is a lot. We like 400,000 is our median. I'd never sold $1 million property before this one. But because I answered my phone, I was quick to respond. I gave them the information they needed. They flew out 2 weeks later. They saw the house. It was about a 3 hour showing, a beautiful property, about 70 acres. And guess what? We put an offer in 3 days later. It was 3 or 4 days of negotiations. And then last month we closed it. And that was my first $1 million property. So like you said, just like answering your phone or being somebody that's known to answer their phone can change a lot. And the second one I'll say is I had a gentleman that just sold a house here for cash. He had about $300,000 in cash that he was going to go buy another property down in Arkansas. And he asked me, hey, can you get me in touch with an agent down there? And I'm like, great, I'll give a referral. Guess how many brokers I had to call before I had somebody pick up their phone? On a Thursday at 2 to 4 p.m.
Five.
Fourth one picked up. So I called, I looked online, found a few that had good reviews, started calling. The fourth one picked up. Do you know what happened? He picked up on a Thursday. That guy flew down there on Saturday. They showed them houses over the weekend. They put an offer in Monday and they closed in 3 days because it was a cash buyer that was going. The guy picked up the phone.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. The two things that I think, as a new agent, if you're a new agent out there, the two things you need to do is answer your phone when you called and follow up with people. The average person only follows up with their people once, right? And sometimes it's not even that much. But if you consistently follow up with people, not being pushy, not being nosy, not being I'm calling them 17 times the first day. No, but if you're consistent with people, most people do not find it annoying if you reach out to them and say, hey, when you have a minute, give me a call, or send them an email of the same kind of thing. You can even call them a couple of times. But if you don't follow up with people, you're not going to do as well as you can. And if you don't answer your phone, you're literally turning money down.
To me, it's amazing that you've been doing this for as long as you have, and you just recently sold your first $1 million house. That's really a testament to your how hard you have to work, because if you were in my market, you would absolutely be crushing it
Well, thank you.
because there's nothing, again, I think we should probably do a book together or something because our sales, it's very, 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 very similar, but you do have to pick up the phone. I have an example of a referral where a Remax person called me from New Orleans and he's like, oh, a good friend of mine, he's moving up. He's a doctor. He was a heart surgeon, basically, a thoracic surgeon. And he's like, yeah, he wants to move up. And I showed two houses on FaceTime.
Mm-hmm.
Two houses on FaceTime. I said I hated the first one. The second one we liked. What the husband never saw the house until after we closed. The wife flew up just to see the house. Contracts were out. After she left the house, they signed the contract because we do a little different in New York. We don't get the contract until after inspections. And then he wired the money while she was like in the house. She's like, okay, we're good to go. $1.6 million. And it's like, and the referral agent, who's his friend, was like, loved it because he got 25% of a $40,000 commission. So he was extremely excited. And I was extremely excited to send a $10,000 check to him because, that's how it works and it's fair. I didn't know who they were. Turns out that the buyers actually know like three of my contacts I found that out through LinkedIn and Facebook. They worked together. He had lived in New York years ago and they worked together. But, picking up the phone, texting, being responsive and caring about people, that's what we're all about. So I know that there's a lot going on in the real estate world with a little bit of changing stuff, but I got to think that for you and for me, it's not really going to change. If anything, we might be busier because they're going to be agents that can't really explain the things, some of our changes, and it's going to confuse some buyers. And buyers are going to look to agents that are more productive. And in life, things change all the time, right? So you need to adapt, right? And that's what our clients have to adapt. That's going to separate the winners from the losers in this sense, or the top performing agents from the mediocre agents is adapting, being there, answering the phone, all the things that you've said.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, I think you always have to look at all the major corporations that have closed, right? Sears, even when I was growing up, was huge. Like this was a gigantic thing that has now closed because they couldn't adapt. So I think there's going to be a lot of agents that don't adapt, but there's a lot of turnover in the industry anyway. I think people that can be professionals, explain to their clients that no, just like you want to call a doctor or a lawyer or anybody else and just say, hey, you have to do this for me right now, and I don't have to sign anything or have any obligation to pay you. You don't do that with anybody else. Like that's in a professional setting. So getting somebody to sign something saying that they're working with you, doing the correct things, being upfront and honest with people. And I still think as much as we can get into all this stuff about the logistics of what's going on in the changes, I really think it comes down to, are you somebody that people can trust? Are you somebody that people that they'll like you? And can you do your job as a professional? If you can have people know you, like you, trust you, and know that you're a professional, you're not going to have any problems.
Yeah, agreed. And another business that I was thinking of would be like Blockbuster Video, right? Blockbuster
Huh?
Video felt that everybody would always want to come into a brick and mortar store to pick
Oh,
up, whether it's a DVD or a VHS tape. There was no reason why they couldn't have been flips, right?
Netflix offered them to buy them out like 4 different times, right? Same thing with
Right.
Google. Yahoo had chances to buy Google and they didn't. Now what's happened to Yahoo? You know?
Exactly. So in anything you need to adapt and things change and things are changing at such fast pace right now. But you're right. In the end of the day, is buying a house or selling a house going to be automated? Probably not, because there's so many things that you have to do. And there's so many things and interactions and people. And yeah, I'm sure you can certainly try some of those. You can do it, but I think in the end of the day, it's not going to work out. But if it does, then we'll have to adapt and pivot to ways that we can add value. So
I heard somebody put it really eloquently the other day, and he said, if you can find a job that you can be a professional, do contracts, navigate the human emotions, and physically be there, if you can navigate all four of those things for AI, that's almost every single job in the world. They're like, so if you can honestly do all of those things, there's very few jobs out there that you couldn't say AI could do. Now, granted, there's people that already do for sale by owners, that already do, flat fee real estate agents. There's already people that do all those other things, right? That aren't doing the traditional user real estate agent. Those things already exist. And the reason they haven't taken over the industry is because, just for the same reason that there are realtors, is because buyers need protections, sellers need people to properly market and protect them as well. And they also need people that they know, like, and trust that can actually do the job to get them and care about them in their moves, right? You can't have somebody that's just, because guess what? I'm dealing with a couple of attorneys right now, and it's affecting a house sale, right? These people need to get into this house. They're supposed to close this Friday. It's going to be pushed out at least 1 week to Friday. They're in a rental that they're supposed to be out of at the end of the month. Well, the attorneys don't seem to care that these people are going to have to spend money on movers, or they're going to have to spend money to like put their stuff in storage or get and pay extra for their rent for the next couple of months. They don't care about any of that stuff, and they're taking days to respond. Well, that doesn't work when things need to happen very quickly, and when people can become homeless, or people are going to lose out on possibly thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's one of those things. Again, there is value in our profession. Granted, there's bad people in every profession. Granted, there's people that don't do the right thing in every profession. You can't show me a profession that they're all 100%, even attorneys. So when you really think about all that stuff, I'm not the guy that's going to be Chicken Little, the sky is falling. Like, that's not going to be me. What I'm going to do is I'm still going to show up to work. I'm going to treat my business like a business, not like a job, not like a hobby, not like something I can take time off of unless I have it planned. And I'm going to still do the pillars that I do to create my business and do it. And then I'll let God and everybody else take care of the rest.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we've been talking for about 50 minutes. We could talk for 3 hours.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
But I thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah.
You're 100. I don't even need to see what your numbers are, just the words that are coming out of your mouth and how, your stories are, you're a superstar. And I'm old, but I'm only about 8 years into this now. So I feel just as like giddy in the sense of, it being new and trying to work and being creative, which is what real estate allows us to do. But you've certainly demonstrated your honesty, your hard working, and your professionalism. That is what is required to being a top, really in many businesses, but certainly in real estate, because you're your own boss. If you don't get the job done, then you're not going to get paid, and you're not going to have someone that tells you that you need to do this, that, or the other thing. It needs to be in your heart and how you want to create your brand. Your brand is spectacular. And just wanted to thank you very much for coming on, Joseph. We probably will have to do this again. We'll have to think of some other topics and then have you back on the show, because you explain things really well and you're the tops in the field. So thank you very much for another episode of the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. I'm Daniel Berger, and every 2 weeks, we're going to have people like Joseph, where it can come on and kind of just talk, about what's going on in our world and just try to share with people and hope all as well. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me on the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. I hope you enjoyed our time together as much as I did. If you laughed, learned something, or just had a good time, do yourself a favor and subscribe to the podcast. A big shout out to our sponsor, RE/MAX Prestige Properties, for making this all possible. Remember to leave a review if you enjoyed the show. It helps more people find us. Until next time, keep it real, keep it fun, and keep exploring the adventures in your neighborhood. I'm Daniel Berger, your New York Realtor, and I'll see you in the next episode.